All right, listeners, I think you know that we are part of the Radiotopia network, which is basically a network built on the idea that you should support the most creative, independent audio makers around. No one, and I mean no one, embodies the Radiotopia ethos more than Benjamin Walker and his show Theory of Everything. Benjamin, who I've known for a long time, has been making beautiful, personal, sprawling audio documentaries for decades that help us understand the very strange world we live in. And now he has a new series called Not All Propaganda is Art. The new series goes back to the 1950s when Western security agencies like the CIA paid artists, writers, and intellectuals to fight the cultural Cold War.
The CIA funds were free. I mean, no one was told what to say.
Gloria Steinem, activist who sees the CIA as a sort of enlightened pal or rich uncle, there is another viewpoint.
Look, if you're listening to this show, I know you like secret histories. I know you like a mix of culture and politics and shadowy figures. So what are you waiting for? Not All Propaganda is Art from Benjamin Walker. You can find it now wherever you listen or at theoryofeverythingpodcast.com. This episode is brought to you by Progressive. Progressive helps you compare direct auto rates from a variety of companies so you can find a great one, even if it's not with them. Quote today at Progressive.com to find a rate that works with your budget. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, April 17th, 1945, in the middle of World War II, a Japanese balloon bomb exploded in the sky over Omaha, Nebraska. I will repeat that. A Japanese bomb explodes in the sky over Omaha, Nebraska. As it happens, throughout 1943, 44, 45, a great number of these types of Japanese bombs made their way onto U.S. soil, or at least over U.S. skies. We think of the attack on Pearl Harbor in 41, of course, that brought the U.S. into the war. And then we think that all the fighting took place elsewhere. But these balloons were what one writer would call the world's first intercontinental ballistic missile, and they brought the war and some casualties onto U.S. soil. So let's talk about the Japanese balloon bombs in the mid-40s. And here to do that, as always, are Nicole Hemmer of Columbia and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
So let's talk about the actual balloons themselves and what these are. And then we'll talk about the sort of strategy as it goes into the war and how it played into it and kind of what it meant. But, you know, when we say balloon bomb, Niki, how can you start to describe what that is?
Yeah, so the thing that I picture are just like 99 Luft balloons floating over the U.S. They're bigger than that, right? Think a cross between a balloon and a blimp. They're 33 feet in diameter. They're paper and rubberized silk that are glued together in order to make these balloons. In likelihood, put together by school children in Japan.
One part of the story here is that the children's hands were the ones that were small enough to be able to stitch together the pieces to make this balloon an amazing wrinkle in this story. Yeah.
It's a total war effort.
Yeah.
And then the balloons carry these incendiary bombs. And what happens, the way that they're delivered, is that by November, there is a jet stream that connects Japan to the continental U.S. And the Japanese had mapped that jet stream. They knew when to release these balloons, and the jet stream would carry it all the way to the U.S. And they were quite clever. They included an altimeter, which would, if the balloon began to sink too low, it would trigger a device on the balloon bomb that would drop some sandbags. So it would lighten the load and let it rise back up. So, when you say balloon bomb, it sounds very childish and very amateurish, but these were actually pretty sophisticated weapons for being balloons.
Yeah. And the intention is not really just to drop them over places where civilians live, but to start wildfires, to spark wildfires throughout the country. I mean, if you think about where these balloons can land, which is really anywhere, but the kind of destruction that they can have, which we've seen recently with the wildfires in California, it does not take much to sort of have this domino effect of violence and chaos. And I think the crazy thing about this whole story is that most Americans were not even aware that this was a threat, that they could look up in the sky and see something that was a bomb from Japan. Like, no one was thinking that.
Well, and the U.S. didn't seem to really believe it for a while either. I mean, they were convinced that, these must be being sent off by either troops that had sort of come on submarines and breached onto U.S. soil and then launched these balloons. But the idea that they were launched from Japan and made their way all across the thousands of mile ocean sort of really baffled American intelligence for a long, long time. On the mechanics of the balloons, too, I mean, how many do you have to send up? I would imagine a good number are going to crash into the ocean or, there's just the sort of inefficiency of this, I guess, sort of strikes me a little bit, too. But I think that was part of the Japanese effort, too, was just to put up as many as possible and send a bunch of them over. We'll get to some of the incidents, like this moment in Omaha where one explodes over a city, fairly inland city. People know where Omaha is. But another part of the Japanese strategy here, which I think is really fascinating, obviously they want to cause destruction. It's a wartime effort. But a big part of this is sending these balloons out, and they were waiting for press reports of these balloons landing on U.S. soil to then be able to track where is the jet stream carrying these balloons and then adjust their strategy and so forth. And the U.S., to your point, Kellie, of people not knowing this is the case, what does the U.S. do? They don't report on it. They don't talk on it. They don't put it in the press. They don't comment. They don't say, there's all these balloons coming over, because I suppose that they catch on to this idea that this is information that the Japanese can then use in order to track how effective and the directionality of these balloons that they're employing. So that's why it basically is just no one knows about it.
Yeah, but that's smart and also incredibly dangerous.
Yes.
Because if you're not warning the public, and that's part of the problem, is that because they did not warn the public of what was coming or what to inspect, when you're hiking in the woods or when you're, walking along a park and you see one of these devices and you don't realize that there's an explosive attached to it. I mean, this is how you get the first casualty, in which people are trying to drag this thing out of the forest and it winds up exploding and killing 6 people. And I can't imagine what kind of, shock that would pose to people, knowing that there were these devices that could go off at any moment if triggered in the wrong way.
It's fascinating to think about both the role of secrecy and fear in the way that the U.S. thought about, the U.S. government and intelligence services and the military thought about how they prosecuted World War II, right? They were concerned about people watching the shorelines, and they were concerned to try to keep as much information encoded and secret as possible. And they were concerned about triggering mass panic and fear in the population. And so that increases the regime of secrecy because they don't want to freak people out. And that combination, as you're saying, Kellie, it also leaves people without information that could be really useful to them.
Do you want to talk about this particular incident that Kellie referenced? This is on the Oregon coast where a couple people actually died.
So there was a Sunday school teacher and her husband, who was a minister, and they were taking a group of teenagers, 5, 13, and 14-year-olds, to Klamath Falls in Oregon. And they're kind of driving along. Elise Mitchell, his wife, starts to get carsick. They pull over. She goes out to take care of her car sickness. The students kind of wander away with her. And a few moments later, he's stayed with the car. She shouts out, "Look what I found." And everyone kind of looks over, and there's an explosion because what they had found was one of these balloon bombs, but they had no idea that it wasn't just a balloon and that there was an incendiary device attached to it. It kills her immediately. It kills 4 of the students immediately, and the 5th student would die a few hours later.
I mean, this is just so tragic because it didn't have to happen, and not saying that if the word had gone out, maybe this incident would never happen, but certainly people would have been aware. I also think that when we think about, how many of these balloons, just to give an idea, Japan launches about 9,000 balloons in a 5-month period. Yes. And about 6,000 of them, sort of float toward North America. About 1,000 reach the continent. There's about 285 reported incidents. Some people reported them as going as far inland as Michigan. So, I mean, that's a lot of chance. That's a lot of incidences. I mean, it's kind of remarkable that we don't have more of these incidences, given the thousands of balloons that were sent off. 285, not to diminish that, but you would think it would be even higher, the sort of catastrophic effect that this could have.
And what's wild is these balloons are still being found. There was one found in Oregon in 1978. There was one found in Canada in 2014, another in 2019. So this Japanese bombing campaign, which I think very few people today certainly know about, still has left its mark all across North America.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the fact that this is sort of, while nefarious, also an ingenious plan to wreak havoc and destruction without ever putting boots on the ground.
Yeah.
You know, so in a lot of ways, I mean, when we think about missiles and anti-ballistic missiles and all of the things drone warfare, all of the things that we think about now in a very modern sense. This is what they were doing with 600 pieces of paper, you know, and there are other chemicals that go into that too. But the fact that school children are putting these contraptions together, I mean, it's terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying to think of the capability of people to do this and be so far away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's such, I mean, this is a strange thing to say about a weapon of war, but there's so much creativity behind this. Like, it's such an innovative weapon, but it's exactly like the idea of unmanned attacks. I'm not sure if intercontinental ballistic missile might be stretching things a bit, but I actually think the drone analogy is a pretty good one, because the distance between the person who is launching the weapon and where the destruction happens, and that it just kind of like floats overhead instead of rains down the way that a missile would. It's an important precedent, I think, for the way that we think about warfare, especially aerial warfare and bombings.
And we should point out that the Allies also experimented with some of this technology. Similar, I think, cruiser balloons were used by Britain to attack Germany around the same time, between 42 and 44. These balloons, you know, this moment we're marking in April 45 over Omaha, it's sort of right around when things were ending, I think, as we've described, because there weren't reports of this success, and then in turn they couldn't sort of improve, so to speak, their efforts. You know, I think the Japanese sort of gave up on this as a tactic around this time, and then obviously by the end of the year, the war has come to a close. But as we said, the balloons are still, you know, it's in May of 45 when the picnickers were killed in Oregon, and then they're continued to be found for decades and decades since. All right, well, we will leave it there. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you.
Thanks, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
This is one of the Japanese paper balloons, identified by the code name Paper. The unit carries up to 4 10-pound incendiaries and a central payload of about 60 pounds of incendiaries or anti-personnel HE bombs to drop on the west coast of the United States and Canada. It may come over in larger and larger numbers. It can be detected by radar or reported by ship and aircraft lookouts. Defensive measures by all services are in operation to meet this menace.
Support for This Day in Esoteric Political History comes from Odoo. If you feel like you're wasting time and money with your current business software, or just want to know what you could be missing, then you'll need to join the millions of others who have switched to Odoo. Odoo is the affordable, all-in-one management software with a library of fully integrated business applications that help you get more done in less time for a fraction of the price. To learn more, visit odoo.com/thisday. That's odoo.com/thisday. Odoo, modern management made simple.
Radiotopia. from PA.